At Thanksgiving, my son's wife called me irrelevant until the bank announced who paid for dinner. And let me tell you, that night changed the course of my family forever. I'll never forget the sting of that word. Irrelevant. Like I was a dusty book no one read anymore, just sitting on the shelf waiting to be forgotten. And she said it in front of everyone. My son, my grandchildren, even the neighbors who'd joined us for dessert. The word rang in my ears louder than the clatter of silverware, louder than the chatter of children. My son's wife, Danielle, smiled sweetly after she said it, sipping her Chardonnay like she hadn't just carved me open at my own Thanksgiving table. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because these family stories are as real and raw as they come. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know who's sitting with me right now. Now, let me take you back to that night. The table was set in my dining room, the same mahogany table I'd polished for 30 years. The turkey was roasted golden brown, stuffing spilling out like treasure. Candles flickered, throwing shadows on the lace tablecloth my late husband, Harold, always said made the room look like a magazine ad. It should have been a beautiful evening. Family, food, gratitude. Instead, it turned into a battlefield. Danielle was wearing this red silk blouse, the kind that looked like it cost more than a month's groceries, with a little gold chain around her neck. She leaned toward my son, whispering something, and then suddenly she straightened her back, looked right at me and said, "Well, you wouldn't understand, Evelyn. You're irrelevant now." The room went quiet. You could hear the old clock in the hallway tick. My fork slipped from my hand, landing on the plate with a sharp clang. My grandson, Noah, looked from me to her, his wide 12-year old eyes confused. I wanted to reply right then, but my son, Michael, cleared his throat. "Danielle," he started, but she waved him off, like a queen dismissing a servant. "Don't get me wrong," she added with that fake smile of hers. "We're grateful for everything you did back in your day, Evelyn. But things are different now. We run the show." In that moment, something inside me cracked. I'd worked 40 years as a bank clerk, scrimped and saved, put my kids through school, paid off this very house down to the last nail. And here she was, in my home, calling me irrelevant. Dinner limped along after that. People tried to laugh, change the subject, but the word sat on the table like a rotten fruit. By the time pie was served, I could barely taste a thing. When everyone finally left, Danielle's perfume still lingered in the hallway, sharp and expensive. I sat in Harold's old recliner, staring at the cold remains of the turkey. Irrelevant. But here's the thing about me. I might look like a sweet old widow, but I keep receipts. Literal receipts. I've got files, folders, every bank statement since 1982. And I knew something Danielle didn't. You see, the truth about that Thanksgiving dinner, the catering bill, the fancy wine, even the florist who dropped off those ridiculous orchids she bragged about, wasn't paid by my son. It wasn't Danielle's doing either. It was me. I had quietly arranged and prepaid for everything through my bank. A little gift to keep the family tradition alive. I wanted no one to worry about money that year. But Danielle, in her arrogance, assumed they had paid. She strutted like a peacock, showing off feathers that weren't hers. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to lash out that night. No, I was going to let the silence grow, let her think she'd won. But the truth has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. A week later, I got a call from my bank manager, Mr. Lawson. He was a tall, stiff man, but he had a soft spot for me because I'd once trained him when he was just a teller. "Mrs. Harris," he said politely, "I just wanted to confirm that the Thanksgiving expenses were processed correctly. I see the florist, the caterer, the wine delivery, all cleared from your account." I almost smiled. "Yes, Mr. Lawson, everything's fine." But then he lowered his voice. "Funny thing, though, your daughter-in-law came in this morning. Danielle. She was confused. She thought she'd already paid those bills." My blood ran cold, but my heart thrilled at the same time. She'd gone to the bank, probably to flaunt her money, and discovered the truth. Well, I said, I suppose she learned something new. Mr. Lawson chuckled softly. Indeed. That's when I knew. This wasn't over. The next family gathering came sooner than expected. Michael's birthday in December. Danielle decorated their house like a palace. Golden balloons, a towering cake with fondant icing, even a violinist hired to play in the corner. Everything looked like it was ripped from a lifestyle magazine. But I noticed her eyes flicker toward me, sharp and watchful, every time the bank or money was mentioned. And then, right there, during Michael's toast, she leaned over to her friend and whispered, not quietly enough, "She's trying to make me look like a fool. But I'll find a way to prove I'm the one in charge." I sipped my champagne and stayed quiet. Let her stew. But what I didn't know then was that Danielle wasn't just prideful. She was reckless, and reckless people leave trails. One cold January morning, I received an official letter in my mailbox. It was from a law firm downtown. Henderson Pike. My stomach knotted as I unfolded it. Danielle had initiated a petition to have me declared financially incompetent, claiming that I was making erratic expenditures and that I needed oversight. In short, she wanted control of my accounts. I sat in my kitchen, letter shaking in my hand. She wasn't just insulting me now, she was coming for my life savings. I called my lawyer immediately, a sharp woman named Linda Graves. She'd handled Harold's estate years earlier, and I trusted her. Linda read the letter carefully, then looked at me over her glasses. Evelyn, she's making a power grab. If this goes to court, they'll examine your finances. But from what I know, you're meticulous. This may backfire on her. I swallowed. So what do we do? Linda smiled thinly. We prepare, and we wait. People like Danielle always overplay their hand. She was right. 2 weeks later, Linda discovered something through a private investigator she'd hired. Danielle had opened multiple credit cards in Michael's name, cards he didn't even know about, and had been funneling money for luxury expenses, handbags, spa retreats, and jewelry. Tens of thousands of dollars. When Linda showed me the file, my jaw dropped. Does Michael know? I asked. Not yet, Linda said, but he will. The case heated up. Danielle marched into court in her designer heels, all smug smiles and crocodile tears, claiming I was confused and forgetful. I wore my navy suit, carried every file and statement neatly organized in binders. The judge listened patiently. And then, Linda presented the investigator's report. Danielle's face drained of color as the evidence was laid out. Every unauthorized purchase, every signature that wasn't Michael's. Michael sat there stunned, his hand trembling as he read the papers. Danielle, what is this? She stammered, tried to explain, but the courtroom was buzzing. The judge frowned. Mrs. Harris appears perfectly competent. In fact, it seems the petitioner has been less than ruthful. This case is dismissed. And just like that, her entire scheme crumbled. But that wasn't the end. The twist came when the bank itself got involved. Because those fraudulent credit cards? Some were tied to my accounts as guarantor without my knowledge, and the bank had started an internal investigation. One brisk February morning, 2 men in suits knocked on Danielle's door. Federal investigators. They had traced multiple transactions, including overseas wires, linked to her spending. What started as a petty insult at Thanksgiving had spiraled into a federal fraud case. I stood at my window across the street, watching as she was led into a black sedan, her face pale, her heels sinking into the snow. And that was the moment I realized, irrelevant? No, I was the very center of the story. The house felt quieter after that February morning, though not in the peaceful way. My son Michael stopped by often, sitting in my kitchen with his head in his hands. I can't believe it, Mom, he whispered one evening, staring at his untouched coffee. All those years, I thought she was building us a future, turns out she was stealing mine. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Michael, you didn't see it because you trusted her. Trust isn't weakness, but now you see her for who she really is. Danielle was indicted on multiple counts of fraud. The newspapers even ran a small article. Local woman accused of forging husband's finances. The photo showed her leaving court, hair messy, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. It was a far cry from the polished woman who once strutted around my Thanksgiving table. But trials take time. Months stretched on, each hearing dragging the family through more tension. Michael filed for divorce in March. Danielle fought tooth and nail, demanding assets, clinging to the illusion of control. But every court session only revealed more of her lies. The lowest point came when my grandson, Noah, asked me quietly, "Grandma, is Dad going to lose the house?" My heart broke. The boded. He had heard whispers, seen lawyers come and go. I bent down, brushed his hair back, and told him the truth. "No, sweetheart. That house will always be yours. I made sure of it a long time ago." What Noah didn't know, what even Michael hadn't fully realized, was that Harold and I had placed the deed to their home in a trust years earlier. The clause stated that if Michael's marriage ended in divorce, the house would automatically revert to him and his children. Danielle couldn't touch it. When Linda brought this up in court, Danielle exploded. She slammed her hands on the table, shouting, "She's been plotting against me from the start!" The judge banged his gavel. "Order! Mrs. Harris is not on trial here. You are!" It was a reversal so sharp it almost felt cinematic. All her arrogance, all her scheming. And suddenly, she was cornered. By April, the bank froze Danielle's accounts. Investigators traced luxury trips, jewelry purchases, even a down payment on a villa in Italy, all using forged signatures. And then came the final twist. Linda handed me a sealed envelope one morning. "You'll want to see this," she said. Inside were copies of Danielle's emails. She had been corresponding with a so-called consultant in the Cayman Islands. She planned to siphon off Michael's retirement savings into an offshore account. What she didn't know was that the consultant was an undercover FBI informant. The sting operation had been running quietly for months, and the night she wired what she thought was the final test sum, $25,000, the agents closed in. By May, Danielle was officially charged with federal wire fraud. She didn't walk out of court that day. They took her straight into custody. The silence that followed was different this time, not tense, not empty, but healing. Michael rebuilt slowly. He threw himself into his work again. The children smiled more, and I found myself breathing easier, as if the air in the house was lighter. 3 months later, I stood in my backyard, watching contractors lay new stone paths. I'd decided to use part of my savings, the money Danielle once called irrelevant, to build a small community garden. Raised beds, benches, flowers. A place for neighbors to gather, for children to learn. At the ribbon cutting in July, Noah tugged on my sleeve and said, "Grandma, you're not irrelevant. You're the most important person I know." Tears blurred my eyes, but I smiled. "Thank you, sweetheart." That night, after the crowd had gone, I sat on one of the benches, listening to the crickets. The memory of Danielle's voice still echoed faintly, irrelevant. But now it made me laugh, because the bank had shown the truth. I wasn't just relevant. I was the foundation they had all been standing on. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this. Arrogance crumbles when faced with patience, truth, and a good lawyer. So, that was my story. At Thanksgiving, my son's wife called me irrelevant. But by the time the bank announced who really paid for dinner, the entire game had changed. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next story. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Has anyone ever tried to erase you from your own story? I'd love to hear.